Greetings, owners of fine luxury cardboard rectangles. We have quite a weird video today because I am stuck in between two different positions. One position is that I absolutely hate the card that we're going to talk about from a mechanical perspective. But when we talk about it from a flavor perspective, I actually have a different opinion. But I do believe genuinely that cards like this should never be created. I don't think this card should exist. Now, what we're going to be talking about is a card tied to a planeswalker from the upcoming Theros Beyond Death set. So, who's the planeswalker we're talking about? It's going to be Ashiok. I want to talk about the planeswalker before we talk about the card because I want you to understand where I'm coming from, and having information about Ashiok is going to aid in that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put an image of Ashiok up on the screen because it's definitely going to make it easier to have this conversation. You need to see Ashiok to fully grasp Ashiok because Ashiok is one of the most bizarre planeswalkers in Magic the Gathering. And I have to try hard to remember to keep saying Ashiok instead of saying he or her because I end up throwing those in there conversationally when I'm talking about Ashiok. But the truth is that Ashiok is an androgynous individual, has no actual specific gender, which I find works for this character. And partially I find that because it's not shoved in your face. I find with a lot of things in current society, instead of developing character, they just go ahead and say, oh, they're this gender or not a gender or whatever. And it's not actually character building. It's just a simple statement that's supposed to mean something, but under it all doesn't really tell you anything about what the person represents, what they are, what matters to them. It's essentially meaningless information to me. But Ashiok, it actually fits for me with Ashiok. Now, Ashiok is a black-blue aligned planeswalker who specializes in mind magic, more specifically specializes in dream and fear magic. I suppose nightmare and fear magic might be a little more accurate because nightmares are the bread and butter of Ashiok. But regardless, the reason that Ashiok likes people's dreams, nightmares, and fears is because Ashiok actually has the ability to take people's fears and their dreams and crystallize them into reality. So if you dreamed up some crazy nightmare beast with 10 different thorny heads and crazy lashing arms, Ashiok could actually pull that out of your mind and take it one step further, where the creations that are crystallized by Ashiok actually serve Ashiok. So it's a way of building an army, essentially. And you're going to, if you think about it from the perspective of Ashiok, they're able to capture beings that they would never conceive of themselves, right? I mean, if you go, let's say you go and watch a horror movie. What's scarier? A horror movie where they just show you the monster and they have to do a really good job of designing a horrific looking monster, and half the time you're just going to wave it away and go, I don't care. Or the movies where you only get hints of the monster. You only get to see impact of what they've done. You only get to see things around the monster without seeing it, or not a monster, a supernatural force, whatever it is. That sort of stuff takes the power of your own imagination and turns it against you. Because what you can imagine generally tends to be more fearsome than what is shown to you directly. So Ashiok is able to harness this. And Ashiok is a really interesting planeswalker visually, because one of the most striking features that you will notice right away is the top of Ashiok's head is essentially missing. What's going on is there's two hard horns that are growing up over on either side of Ashiok's head, and in between it you've got all this black smoke that kind of like the essence of darkness that's leaking out of Ashiok's head. But Ashiok also has a human face underneath. So a human mouth with no eyes. And this is all very unsettling for humans because we are face-seeking creatures. That's how we're wired. We're wired to look for faces it's a way of connecting with fellow humans, and also it's a way of finding out if there are other animals in the vicinity that may attack you. So we by nature are designed to seek faces. When we look at artwork or things like that, you will always look for a face. That's why people will look at the front of cars and go, oh, look, it's kind of a face. And actually why cars are designed to have kind of an angry look at the front. Like there's all kinds of ways that this psychological face-seeking nature comes into play. But it's really strong when you look at Ashiok, because you look at Ashiok's face and you go, oh my God, like there's no eyes, so you can't connect with the eyes, and you can read the depth of somebody's soul by looking deep into their eyes, right? So you instead of seeing eyes, you're instantly drawn. You see the mouth, and then you look upwards and you see those horns with the black smoke drifting away. Now, Ashiok wasn't always like this. Ashiok at one point had a more humanoid head. The type of magic that Ashiok uses is so powerful that, first of all, most likely, it would just destroy a regular mortal. But Ashiok is no regular mortal. Ashiok is a planeswalker. So as a result, this insanely powerful magic has actually eaten away at Ashiok's essence. It's eaten away at Ashiok's head. So you have a void where part of Ashiok's head should be. And its place is dark, lingering smoke that will actually trail around Ashiok's body as well. Another inhuman part of Ashiok are the gigantic claws coming out of the sides here, right? Like not out of the sides, but I'm looking at a particular piece of art while I talk about this, so I'm thinking about the claw from the side angle here. But either way, Ashiok has these gigantic claws instead of human hands, adding another level to the inhuman nature. So wielding magic that no mortal was meant to wield has wrought irrevocable changes on Ashiok. And Ashiok is actually tied to Theros more tightly than other planes because Theros' dream stuff has more power than other planes, right? Theros has gods that were born out of the belief of the people. So as a result, belief, thought, dreams, fears, those all have more power on Theros. And since that is Ashiok's trade, that's what Ashiok is interested in, you end up with a scenario where Theros is a natural fit. You're going to be able to mess around a lot. In fact, Ashiok actually was involved in birthing a god on Theros. Now, that god did not survive for very long, and that is a story for a full-on Ashiok lore video. But just to give you a concept, Ashiok has meddled enough in Theros that Ashiok was able to birth a new god that was quickly wiped out by another god. But again, a story for another time. And as a side note, Ashiok would probably do quite well on a world like Amonkhet before Nicol Bolas had wreaked his havoc and wiped out most of the gods, because again, that is a place where the gods gain their power through the belief of followers. So Ashiok is going to have a higher level of influence and power and be able to create better minions in those areas. But either way, I find Ashiok to be a fascinating planeswalker. Now let us move on to the card itself that we're going to talk about today, because I know I have gone on a fair bit about Ashiok, but I figured to fully understand why I enjoy what I enjoy about this card, you'll need that information. To understand what I hate about the card, you don't need that flavor background, and we are going to talk about what I hate about the card first. So the card is called Ashiok's Erasure. This is 2 blue and 2 colorless for a blue enchantment. It has flash, and that's going to be necessary for the way the card operates. When Ashiok's Erasure enters the battlefield, exile target spell. Your opponents can't cast spells with the same name as the exiled card. And when Ashiok's Erasure leaves the battlefield, return the exiled card to its owner's hand. Now, this may, in some regards, make you think of something like the meditation prison realm that they have. You know, it's in standard right now, Prison Realm. But the thing about Prison Realm is Prison Realm only removes something until Prison Realm goes away. Ashiok's Erasure uses 2 separate triggers. And what this means is that you can use Ashiok's Erasure to exile a spell, and then you can either bounce or sacrifice Ashiok's Erasure immediately, and then there is no chance for your opponent to actually get their spell back. It's literally not possible, because the trigger saying return the card goes on the stack first, it resolves, and then the exile trigger actually happens, so the spell is gone forever. So this is repeatable exiling type counterspell. Let's not mince words. This is a counterspell that does not use the words counter target spell. And that is where I have the biggest problem with this card. When it comes to counter magic that exiles spells, in my opinion, it should always, always, always be counter target spell. If the spell is countered in this fashion, exile it. That still allows you to counter the spell. It still allows you to exile it. However, what it doesn't do is let you circumvent the protections built into other cards, like, for example, the newest Chandra that says this spell can't be countered. Or the Triceratops, that awesome, awesome green Triceratops that we have from M20 that also says can't be countered. They don't put can't be countered on very many spells. And this is supposed to be the whole like, okay, look, these are the enemy colors of blue. They should be allowed to have some uncounterable spells. But by having a spell that exiles instead of countering, what they're doing is they're allowing blue players to counter spells that shouldn't be counterable. They're nullifying that advantage that the uncounterable spells have, and there are not a ton of uncounterable spells. To me, this is giving an unreasonable level of power to blue. Now you compound that problem with the fact that not only does this spell exile, effectively it's a counter spell that exiles a spell so they lose that spell, but it also shuts off their ability to cast future copies of the spell. Now blue shouldn't be able to preemptively stop you. Blue shouldn't get to counter spell and then preemptively stop you from casting all other copies of that spell. Yes, this spell does cost 4 mana, but that, in my opinion, is too powerful. It's a bridge too far. I cannot accept this as reasonable. Blue is already an incredibly oppressive color. Blue is the most unfun color to play against in Magic the Gathering by a large margin. Like, blue is the most unfun color, and there isn't anybody else in terms of color that is even close to competing with that. The counter spells, all of that, it has a psychological effect. In fact, I intend to do a video talking about the psychological effects of playing against blue versus other colors. Blue is the most unfun color, and people who are drawn to playing blue counterspell decks generally are interested in their opponent having as little fun as possible while also dragging the game out. It's the worst combination of attributes. So this allows you to get around cards that say they can't be countered, exile them, and then stop your opponent from playing more copies of it. Essentially, preemptive counterspells. That's what it is. This counters the first copy you play of the spell and every successive copy in advance. You can't try and play around it. Once Ashiok's Erasure is hit, you can't try and play around it with your other copies and try and find a way to get around their counterspells. You literally can't. You're just stuck under the thumb of this card. And that, to me, is insane. It's too powerful. It's unbalanced. I don't believe that this card should exist. I don't think that Wizards of the Coast should move Blue's wheelhouse of countering spells over to exiling spells. This is not okay. It's one thing to have a spell like Spelljack, where you exile your opponent's spell because you get to cast it later. That's one thing. But when you exile the spell and then add on the fact that the other copies can't be cast, that's where it becomes too ridiculous to me. It already irks me enough that they're going, oh, by the way, oh, you have uncounterable spells? Well, guess what? I essentially countered it. And it's like, slight word difference, ha, ha, ha. That it's infuriating. It drives me crazy. Now, let's talk about what I like about this card. Overall, the artwork is pretty engaging. You have Ashiok literally holding someone there in one of Ashiok's claws, just holding them immobile while drawing magic directly out of their skull, through their eyeballs, just pulling the magic into this pulsating sphere that will remove it from existence. Oh, yeah, actually, I guess there's one other thing I should cover. When it comes to like the whole, anybody who's like, well, Ashiok, Ashiok's Erasure will give them the card back when the enchantment goes away. There are very few cards that people use in any kind of competitive way at all that will handle this. Green will have the easiest time handling this, but red can't do anything about it. Red can't do anything about it. Black can't do anything about it, but red is one of blue's enemy colors, and it literally can do nothing about this. To me, the fact that you can technically get the spell back is so minor, and the fact of the wording of it also allows you to go ahead and go, oops, look at this, I can actually permanently exile your spell if I just sacrifice this in response. So it can become even stronger where there's literally no way to get your spell back. I meant to mention that when I was talking about it mechanically, so figured I'd just backpedal for a moment and talk about that. Now, back to the artwork. We have this really just imposing, like, Ashiok looks like they're casually holding this person. This person can't move while the magic's being drawn from them. You can see the black essence just like smokily leaving the top of Ashiok's head, set against this kind of gloomy backdrop. You've got that big vicious claw that's up to the side there holding the magic. This is the artwork that I was looking at, by the way, while I was describing Ashiok. So earlier in the video when I said claw off to the side, that's why you heard me say that. Now, from a flavor perspective, this card works really well. The concept of pulling magic, pulling something out of somebody's mind and going, okay, I've found this magic, I've tuned into it, and I've created the ability to like have this resonance where not only can you not use this magic, I've pulled all traces of it from your mind. If you try and make it happen again, you literally just can't. So from a flavor perspective of a mage that deals in pulling dream stuff, nightmares, fears from people's minds, this is a different variation of it where Ashiok can directly pull magic from somebody's mind instead. So overall, it's an absolute flavor win, 100%. Mechanical mega fail, flavor win. Now, a flavor win is never enough to offset a mechanical fail because at the end of the day, mechanics are what make the game work. Flavor is what adds depth to the game for enjoyment, for story, for all of that. But mechanics are what determine how playable things are, how enjoyable they are. And for me, this card absolutely should not exist. Now, I know people are going to have different opinions about this one. So let me know what you guys think about this in the comment section overall. As an added note, YouTube glitched out and unsubscribed a bunch of people. So if you want to just double check if you want to be subscribed, that you are subscribed, go ahead and do that. And since I'm trying to get attention over there now, I do have a second channel where I'm making very funny and ridiculous videos. So I invite you to come on by and have a laugh with me. I will link I'll link to that channel at the end of this video so that you can go and check it out if you want. I'll put up a magic video and a video from my other channel so you can choose your level of involvement. I appreciate everybody coming by. I especially appreciate my patrons and channel members. And remember, my friends, together we are the sixth color of magic.